The House will come to order. Members be at their seats. The clerk has opened the roll and you may record your presence. Please rise and give your attention to the House chaplain, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Representative Francis.
Good morning, friends. Allow me to pray for you. Dear Father, in the book of Psalms we read, "In thee, O Lord, I have taken refuge. Let me never be ashamed. In thy righteousness deliver me and rescue me. Incline thine ear to me and save me. Be thou to me a rock of habitation to which I may continually come. Thou hast given commandment to save me, for thou art my rock and my fortress. Rescue me, O my God, out of the hand of the wicked, out of the grasp of the wrongdoer and ruthless man." Father, today as we look at the myriad of things facing us, we truly want to find a refuge in you. We're about to enter into much debate and deliberation. When the votes are recorded and we are able to look back, help us to have acted in such a way as we can be pleased. I pray that every discussion participated in and every vote that is recorded will find decisions based on what is right and just. Sharpen our minds as we look closely at that which will be put before us. Might everything we do be shrouded in your righteousness. And for the person who just might be getting on our nerves a bit, help us to extend grace even when it's not returned or even acknowledged. Might our satisfaction come from knowing that you know our hearts and why we do what we do. We do pray for the sick and vulnerable in our individual communities. Bring resources and resourcers to their aid, I pray. I also pray for the families of each one gathered here in this chamber of decision. Give them patience with the long days and seemingly endless meetings that demand our attention, the attention which many times rightly belongs to them. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. To the republic which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Have all the members had the opportunity to record their presence? The clerk will close the roll and record the attendance. The Speaker recognizes Representative Beeler on a point of personal privilege.
Okay. So I would invite any Vietnam veterans down here if you want to come down. We're here to recognize a Vietnam veteran today. And I'm joined at the well. So colleagues, thank you for your attention this morning and on this special occasion as we recognize a truly great Kansan, the late Colonel Roger H.C. Donlin, the first recipient of the Medal of Honor during the Vietnam War. Today I'm joined at the well by Mrs. Norma Donlin, the widow of Colonel Donlin. I'm not going to try to point to all of them, but retired Colonel Mike and June Neer, Justine Donlin Jeschke, and Jordan Donlin, both granddaughters of Colonel Donlin, Jackie Flores, a family friend, Deborah Crater from the Topeka VA Caregiver Program, Kevin Reagan and Art Fillmore, attorneys and friends of the family, and then Pat Warren, who's the spouse of Senator Kelly Warren and the president of the Kansas Speedway in CASA. So, in the gallery, I'd like to recognize Terry Buckler, the president of Special Forces Association Chapter 29, Frank Goss and his guest Betty, and Frank happened to be a CGSC instructor for my son-in-law, Lieutenant Colonel Brandon Lundgren, and Amy Nooch is up there as well. So before I begin reading the citation, the Medal of Honor, for those of you who don't know, is the United States' highest award for military valor in action. The first Medal of Honor was awarded in 1861, and there have been 3,536 Medals of Honor awarded, 618 of which have been awarded posthumously. And there were also 235 recipients of the Medal of Honor during the Vietnam War. So today, we are here to welcome Mrs. Donlin, her family and friends to the Kansas State Capitol to honor the legacy of her husband, the late Colonel Roger H.C. Donlin. He was the first recipient of the Medal of Honor during the Vietnam War, a truly remarkable Kansas citizen from Leavenworth, and Colonel Donlin was also the first Special Forces member to be a recipient of the Medal of Honor. And today, as we pay tribute to him, I'd like to read an excerpt from his Medal of Honor ceremony presentation. And this is from December 5th, 1964. And this is, you were present, Mrs. Donlin, Senator Hayden, Senator Keating, Senator-elect, I'm sorry, I messed that up. Senator-elect Kennedy, Secretary McNamara, ladies and gentlemen. This is a proud moment for all Americans. We are here today to present this nation's highest honor to Captain Roger H.C. Donlin, United States Army. On July 6th of this year, Captain Donlin was the commanding officer of the United States Army Special Forces Team A726 at Camp Nam Dong, Vietnam, in the Republic of South Vietnam. Under cover of night, a reinforced Viet Cong battalion launched a full-scale attack on the camp. A violent battle took place lasting 5 hours. The Viet Cong enemy used mortars, grenades, and heavy enemy gunfire. Captain Donlin was wounded 4 times, in the stomach, in the leg, in the shoulder, and in the face. Wounded though he was, Captain Donlin directed a successful defense of the camp. He moved from post to post and man to man within the camp perimeter. Despite his multiple wounds, Captain Donlin, with great courage and coolness, inspired the American personnel and their friendly Vietnamese troops to a successful defense of their camp. No one who has seen military service will fail to appreciate and understand the magnitude of Captain Donlin's heroic performance under enemy fire and in the darkness. This Medal of Honor, awarded in the name of Congress, is the first such honor to be bestowed upon an American military man for conspicuous gallantry above and beyond the call of duty in our present efforts in the Republic of Vietnam. So next week, Governor Kelly has proclaimed April 10th to be 2024 to be Colonel Roger H.C. Donlin Day. And today, I present this certificate to Mrs. Donlin, and it reads as follows. State of Kansas, House of Representatives. in recognition and grateful memory for his exceptional gallantry, inspirational leadership, and courage under heavy enemy fire on July 6, 1964, while successfully leading the defense of his forces at Camp Nam Dong in the Republic of Vietnam. The entire membership extends its appreciation for his exemplary service to the United States. Mr. Speaker, I request my words be spread across the journal.
This is for you.
Without objection, so ordered. Messages from the Senate, the clerk will read.
The Senate adopts the conference committee report to agree to disagree on House Bill 2465 and has appointed Senators Tyson, Peck, and Holland as second conferees on part of the Senate.
Representatives Humphreys, Lewis, and Osmond are appointed to replace Representatives Concanon, Johnson, and Owsley as conferees on House Bill 2070. Representatives Adam Smith, Bergkamp, and Sawyer are appointed to replace Representatives Sutton, Penn, and Neighbor as conferees on House Bill 2097. Are there announcements? Seeing none, the Speaker recognizes the Majority Leader for a motion to recess.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republicans, we will calendar in the old Supreme Court immediately upon recess. Mr. Speaker, I move the House stand in recess until 10:45 a.m.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The House is in recess. The House will be in order. The Speaker recognizes Representative Adam Smith for a motion to adopt the Agree to Disagree report for House Bill 2465.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2465, or the conference committee report for this bill. Just want to explain what the contents are. It contains House Bill 2757, which is the adoption savings account bill that passed this chamber on March 27th, 123 to 0. It also includes the contents of Senate Bill 498, which is the adoption tax credit, and the Pregnancy Resource Act. I can go into details if there's any questions, but those are the provisions that are within the conference committee report. So I'll stand for questions.
Is there discussion? Seeing none, Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt the Agree to Disagree conference committee report and that a new conference committee be appointed.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion passes. The Speaker appoints Representative Adam Smith, Bergkamp, and Sawyer as conferees on part of the House. Speaker recognizes Representative Hoheisel for a motion to concur in conference on House Bill 2577.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2577 was the state treasurer's bill, just allows the state treasurer to move unclaimed property funds more easily from the Capers Fund over. The Senate made one change. It was just a date change. We went to conference. We took a look at it. We agree with them. So, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House concur and send amendments to HB 2577, which is in conference.
For discussion, the Speaker recognizes Representative Shu.
Mr. Speaker, bill's good.
Seeing no further discussion, Representative, you may close.
Close.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2577. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Representative Lewis votes aye. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, with 120 having voted in favor and 2 against the passage of House Bill 2577, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Are there announcements? Speaker recognizes Representative Stogsdill.
Democrats, we will resume agenda meeting at 12 o'clock, 152 South. 12 o'clock. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the members of the Appropriations Subcommittee to study contract nursing, we will still meet today at noon. We have a report to formulate based on the last 3 days, so I will see you in room 582 at noon. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. House and Senate Judiciary will have conference committee meeting in 582 upon the adjournment of whichever chamber adjourns second. Thank you.
Seeing no further announcements, the Speaker recognizes the Majority Leader for a motion to recess.
Okay, Republicans, we are going to calendar at 12 o'clock in the old Supreme Court. As a question was asked, I would recommend getting an early lunch. Mr. Speaker, I move the House stand in recess until 12:30 p.m.
You've all heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The House is in recess. The House will be in order. The Speaker recognizes Representative Christy Williams for a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 387.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. First, I'll take a moment to explain this CCR package. It includes the full constitutional funding and historic special education funding, which includes $77.5 million of new special education money. It also includes a total of $309 million in new education funding. It also amends the at-risk portions of the bill and delays it in 1 year. And it also maintains necessary accountability with the commitment of this constitutional funding. Mr. Speaker, I move to adopt the conference committee report, and I'll stand for questions.
Is there discussion? Seeing none. Representative, nope. Representative Nguyen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, there were tweaks made. There is new funding. It is tied, contingent upon the LOB component. Not enough. Please vote no.
Representative Younger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Here we go again. Same song, second verse. I'll talk about it in a different order this time. I'm not going to remind you about the characteristics of an at-risk student other than, an at-risk student has several issues: socioeconomic issues, behavioral issues, attendance issues, emotional challenges, lack of parental support, learning difficulties, transience, substance abuse, limited English proficiency. Kids come to school with these issues. They're not manifested in school. They come to school with so many of these issues. And teachers deal with these every single day. Every single day they deal with these issues before they can teach the academic subjects oftentimes. The answer to this at risk isn't to take money away, it's to support the schools. Special Education Interim Committee. This is the best education committee we have. It needs to continue, simple as that. Let those people meet. Let them come back with their recommendations. See what they have to say. Let them come back. The funding. Again, I said this before. No district receives more in special ed state aid than their actual expenses. County local option budget is robbing Peter to pay Paul. And I admit, there is new money. I apologize if I didn't get this correct last time. I did not mean to mislead anybody, but there is $77.5 million new money in this. That's a fact. That's a fact. I can't dispute that. But some of the other new money, the $228 million, that's for the base state aid. That's a statutory obligation, the CPI increase. That's what that is. That's not new money. That's money that's coming in that's supposed to be there. County and LOB money is not new money. It's local money. And I stand by my claim that this is voodoo math. Now, from constituents, I've heard that constituents, hey, they're quiet on this. They're okay with it. Well, let me tell you, I've heard from your constituents. I've heard from people from Liberal, Leawood, Olathe, Hayes, Elkhart, Johnson City, Scott City, Holcomb, Hugoton, Sublette, Garden City, Emporia, Dodge City, Syracuse, Russell, Valley Falls, Pittsburgh, Oakley, Brewster, Shiloh, Golden Plains, Healy, Hill City, Hoxie, Oberlin, Quinter, Rollins County, Sharon Springs, St. Francis, Tri-Plains, Waukene, Wheatland, Brown County Special Education Interlocal, Newton, Heston, Halstead, Paola, DeSoto, Wichita, Shawnee Mission, Moscow, Olathe, Great Bend, Ellenwood, Poisington, Blue Valley, Altoona, Ulysses, High Plains at Ulysses, Chanute, Crest, Erie, Ellis, La Crosse, Victoria, Humboldt, Iola, Marymount Valley, Yates Center, Holton, Satanta, Prairie Hills, Onega, Jackson Heights, Royal Valley, Colby, Lenexa, Goodland, Phillipsburg, Hutchinson, Nickerson, South Hutchinson, Fairfield, Pretty Prairie, Haven, Bueller, Wichita, Garner, Ashland, Flint Hills Cooperative, Marion, Abilene, Manhattan, Jefferson West, Junction City, Salina, Shawnee, Leawood, Marshall Nemaha Educational Service Center, and Augusta. I've heard from them, and they've all said no. No to Senate Bill 387. That's what they've told me. And I know that they've told you that too, because most of these were emails, a carbon copy to me. So trust your constituents. Also yesterday, the Kansas Association of Special Administrators, KNEA, United School Administrators of Kansas, Kansas Association of School Boards, and the Kansas State Board of Education all said no to Senate Bill 387. Right before I came down here, I received a letter. And this is probably, I hope that you'll listen, you'll pay attention, because this parent can say this, it says this better than I can. Greetings, it's Crosby's mom again. If you're receiving this, it's because you have, at some point, given me hope about special education funding in the state of Kansas. Either through your voting record, your advice to me, to just keep showing up and keep using your voice, or receiving it because you showed kindness when my 6-year-old had a meltdown in front of the house last year on World Down Syndrome Day. Or you've given me hope through your social media presence, or advised me on the process of how to advocate for resources for all kids in Kansas who need extra support. Or you're one of the parents fighting the good fight with me. Or you failed to show up for a meeting that I drove 2 hours to make. Whatever reason, I've added you to this list. I'm writing because I desperately need you to hear my voice and the voice of other parents whose kids are in special education in Kansas. I received a call yesterday from a reporter asking about my thoughts on the current proposal for funding special ed in Topeka through Senate Bill 387. My primary thoughts are that I'm disappointed, sad, frustrated, and tired. I've been challenged through the current proposal should be something I'm happy about because there's funding for special ed. I'm always very aware that it will become as a trade-off for chronically underfunded special ed. Changing the algorithm using local tax dollars so it appears the funding is there is not the answer for our under-resourced schools. If you're concerned that some districts are funded over the 90% threshold, I would invite you to do some research into the special ed cooperatives and how they operate and review the per-child costs for services in rural areas with fewer children seeking services. I've been reminded that we have legal rights. I can file complaints if my son's IEP is not met. I can't seem to get anyone to understand that it's not the letter of the law or the minutes in the IEP that are the issue. School districts will do what they can to meet the bare minimum. It is all the other things that go into making a successful life for a child with special needs. The million things not in the IEP are the issue. A few stories from my friends. It is the learning tub that gets used in general education to fill time that no one realized needs to be refreshed. Surely it is only two 15-minute sessions a day. But when it takes 6 months until someone realizes that that has not been refreshed, it means a loss of learning for students, for all students. It's the little things that lead to what is commonly referred to as by our families as a lost year. This is my son's only chance at his developmental milestones. They take longer and we work harder for them. We're in our 4th year of potty training at home and at school. School districts are doing everything they can with the funding they have to meet the needs. This is coming at the cost of mental health, of special education, and the paras we do.
Representative, there has been objection to you reading.
Thank you. And I will close that this is from Crosby's mom. And I will close, Mr. Speaker, with this. Arnold Schwarzenegger was recently asked about artificial intelligence. He was. I'm not as concerned about artificial intelligence as I am about basic stupidity. Real life stupidity worries me more than AI. Let's fully fund special education with a clean special education funding bill. Thank you.
Speaker recognizes Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. But prior to this session, I had met with many special ed folks in my district. I got to see kind of what goes on in the classroom, and I got to see some of the challenges that my school district faces. In trying to learn more about this school finance formula and how the special ed funding is appropriated, it can be very confusing. And I do appreciate the chair taking much time with me, trying to understand the contents of this bill. However, I am not convinced that changing the special ed statute is the appropriate way to go. Currently, my school district has to reappropriate $5.4 million from the general ed population of students to satisfy the federal and state mandates as it relates to special ed. I know the school finance formula expires in 2027, and I think that's something we need to look at, but I just think at this day, at this hour, I am not convinced that is the way to go. So I will be voting no on SB 387. Thank you.
Representative Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Body, this is one of the more difficult bills that you would have to understand this year. I want to tell you a story. It's a story about a town in Kansas. Let's call it Anywhere, Kansas. And it's got 3 businesses in the town. One business is called LeBron's Sports Shop. Another business is called the General Store. And the third business is called World Market. All 3 of these businesses are managed by a gentleman by the name of Pete. We'll call him Pete the Cat. That was supposed to be funny. These 3 businesses are all owned by a group of investors. And Pete the Cat has had a really good year. It's the end of the fiscal year. Pete does a great job. These businesses are thriving. And in fact, They have a 33% net gain for the year. Now, Pete's a little worried about this because he relies on investors to give him money to expand his businesses. And so he comes up with this bright idea. Pete says, world market's going to make nothing this year. We're going to take the money that is generated off a world market and we're going to put it into LeBron's sports shop and the general store. And that way we can say that world market needs more investor money. Now, by now, you're probably realizing that I'm doing an analogy of what goes on with LOB money in our current system. For the last 7 years, the LOB money that has been generated off of the excess cost of special education students has gone not into the special education fund, where it should rightly go, but it has gone into the general fund or the athletic fund or the increase of salary for the superintendent fund or whatever fund the local district wants to do. Now, I know many of you have gotten letters from school boards and superintendents saying, keep the status quo. We like it. I encourage you to put special ed money where it belongs with special ed kids. My brother is an autistic adult now, and so special ed is really personal to me. And I fought hard to get the increases put into special ed. And previous speakers that have denigrated the amount of money put in for special education is somewhat offensive to me. I want to see special ed fully funded. I want to see those kids taken care of. And I don't believe that hiding special ed money other places does that. I think increasing our responsibility for special ed and at the same time cleaning up what local districts do with special ed generated money makes sense. And I encourage you to look past the rhetoric, look past the army of people that have written letters, the army of organizations, and let's focus on funding special ed, taking care of kids. Is this a perfect bill? No, we haven't seen one of those yet in this body, have we? Are there still things that need to be fixed? Yes. But I encourage you to vote for special ed, vote for fully funding special ed, and vote yes on 387.
Seeing no further discussion, Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. And this is your opportunity today to vote in favor of kids, special education kids, general education kids. You can say you did your part to approve special education increases as well as general education increases. It is the responsible answer. It is the transparent and accountable answer in the changes that we've made, in the accountability that we have included. And I would ask you to stand with kids, stand with adding the money that's constitutional and historic, especially for special education kids. So Mr. Leader, I close and move my motion.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 387. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, with 65 having voted in favor and 58 against the passage of Senate Bill 387, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The Speaker recognizes Representative Waymaster for a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 18.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 18 has the contents of Senate Bill 552 that was passed by the Senate. And we had a conference committee yesterday because we have not seen Senate Bill 552. It was sent over to the House very late. But it is of an important matter that we have actually discussed for many years, and that is in regards to the higher education deferred maintenance, which has been plaguing our universities, community colleges, technical schools, and also our municipal university for many, many years. In fact, the amount of deferred maintenance in that particular higher education system is reaching a point of $1.3 billion. So Senate Bill 18 creates the Kansas Campus Restoration Act and authorizing the Kansas Board of Regents to adopt rules and regulations regarding deferred maintenance and demolition of facilities for our higher institutions. All expenditures that would be administered through the Board of Regents to our 6 regent universities would require a 1-to-1 match. The bill also requires that there would not be a match in regards to our community colleges, technical colleges, municipal university, and Institute of Technology, or from the state education institutions deferred maintenance account. The amount of the transfer starting in fiscal year 2026 would be $30 million for the institutions, the regent schools, and then $2.7 million for the community colleges, technical colleges, and municipal universities in fiscal year 2026, and that runs through the bill through 2031. With this bill, when it passed the Senate, the vote was 34-6, and so therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 18, and then stand for questions.
For discussion, the Speaker recognizes Representative Helgerson.
Previous speaker described the bill very adequately. I think most of you are in favor of demolishing the buildings on campus so that they can be replaced with a newer building. And I urge you, if that's the case, to support the bill.
Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 18 is a bill I think is just really a bridge too far. That you have to realize that not K through 12, but higher education, these institutions on their own have budgets of $800, $900 million alone individually. The state is just a small part of the money that they have. The way any institution gets in the problem of deferred maintenance, it's a self-inflicted injury. It's not something we did to them. It's something they did to themselves by poor management, by poor realization of constantly building brand new buildings rather than rehabbing old buildings when the case comes up. You have to realize that we actually have record funding for higher education. We have like over $1.3 billion, I think, coming forward in fiscal year 2025. This would be on top of that. In just the 6 years that I've been here, higher education has gone from roughly $800 million up to the $1.3 billion status. I mean, it is not for a lack of funding that these colleges, these institutions are in this particular predicament. You know, they make choices. You know, they could have allocated their budgets in years gone by in different methods, and they would not be facing this problem, or certainly not to the extent that they are. I don't think that in an era where we are already improving record budgets, where particularly we've had a record budgetary spending, state general fund budgetary spending for higher education, that we should be on top of that, throwing another $36 million for the next 6 years, a $200 million total package. I think this is to the point of being reckless. It's certainly beyond what the people in my district, I mean, if I go around and look at people's houses and I go around and look at college campuses in the state of Kansas, I think the college campuses have a lot better buildings than what the taxpayers do across the state. And I urge you to vote no on Senate Bill 18. Thank you.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would encourage the previous representative to look out the window at the docking building. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion, Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 18.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 18. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Chuck Smith votes aye. Members will be in their seats. Any other changes? Seeing none, with 86 having voted in favor and 37 against the passage of Senate Bill 18, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The Speaker recognizes Representative Berquist for a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 384.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 384 comes back to the body after being returned to committee for more consideration. Some changes were made. There's a verbiage change that allows, as I will read as follows, the board shall not require any ground vehicle providing interfacility transfers from any county with a population of 30,000 or less to operate with more than one person that satisfies the requirement of subsection B, which is an EMT, if the driver of such vehicle is certified in cardiopulmonary resuscitation. So a change was made from a city of 50,000 to a county of 30,000, which lowered the requirement down to the smaller counties that are most appropriately met by this measure. And so we believe that was the closest we were going to come to an agreement in the committee. There were some other things that we were not able to address, but the concerns that were met in the vote earlier, we did what we could. We also included SB 162, which is the nuisance abatement law that was similar to 362, which was Sedgwick County's sunset provision. And the sunset provision would be for Crawford County and Riley County. And that is also part of this bill. Mr. Speaker, I move the adoption of the Conference Committee report, and I would stand for questions.
Speaker recognizes Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The speaker did a fine job explaining the bill, and I appreciate the negotiations that took place between both the Senate and the House. I'd like to point out that I was one of 4 people who voted against this bill the first time. It is my general position to oppose any attempts by the legislature to establish health policy. I prefer to leave that in the hands of the professionals. However, thanks to the changes made to the bill, I do now support this bill. The standards we are setting forth are what are currently enacted by the EMS board, which would be a driver with some training and a certified or licensed technician in the back. And I believe if they have set that standard, we can stick with it. I also think I was remiss in not mentioning before, although I mentioned in committee, that I would invite all of you and your young people interested in the EMT fields to come to the community college in the center of my district, where we have one of the finest EMR, EMT, and paramedic training programs in the state. That just happens to have my husband as one of the medical directors. So I've just put a shout out for District 16 in my community college, but I do appreciate the negotiations we went through and the compromise we reached, and I appreciate that the professional voices are being respected here, and I do encourage a yes vote. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, Representative, you may close.
Hearing a number of concerns that were given in this body concerning small communities being afraid that we're not going to have the staffing they needed to be able to take care of the emergencies in their community. I believe we've gone a little ways towards that, and I hope that in next year and in the years to come we can improve this even more. Mr. Speaker, I move my motion.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 384. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, with 122 having voted in favor and 1 against the passage of Senate Bill 384, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The Speaker recognizes Representative Sutton for a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 356.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 356 is a combination of 5 insurance bills, 4 of which you're going to be very familiar with and probably not extremely excited by. The 5th one's cool, though, so pay attention. SB 338 is the first one in there. That's the group-funded liability and group-funded workers' compensation pools. We just modified some reporting requirements for those. That passed the House on 3-7 at 103 to 17. Senate Bill 339 was the risk-based capital version update. We do it every year. There's nothing exciting here. That also passed the House 3-7, 103 to 17. Senate Bill 356, the base bill, changed the per diem amounts and expenses for outside consulting and data processing fees and pro rata funding for examination equipment. The only sticking point between the House and the Senate on that one was the language of reasonable. The House had the more legally defined term of average and reasonable. The Senate, in their wisdom, went along with the House language on that. So that one passed the House 109 to 11. HB 2663, it's kind of interesting. It allowed the real-time submission of escrow settlement and closing funds. So that one passed the House 222 at 119-0. Now, SB 553, this is one that we have not seen. It did pass through the Senate on both the committee and the floor, but it didn't get over here. The base bill wasn't all that interesting. It was allowing electronic delivery of plan documents and identification cards for health benefit plans. Nothing to be really fired up about there, but there was an amendment in committee there that I thought was really interesting and really gave me pause. I had to really review and think about this one. It amended the establishment of electronic portals, or the requirement of the establishment of electronic portals for prior authorization. Now, this is matching, after I did some research, this is actually matching what is coming in federal law. And in their committee, they changed the date of implementation for the federal. Currently, the federal plan is supposed to go into effect January of 2027. Because there could be changes made in the Fed's plans, and we recognize that, they moved the inaction date on the state level to January of 2028. And this process was kind of neat. When we're dealing with prior authorization, that's a real sticking point between some of the health providers and some of the insurance providers. And the committee on the Senate side, I've got to commend them. They don't always do great work over there on the east side, but this committee did a good job. They had everyone at the table. They had the insurance providers and the health providers, and they came out with this legislation. And I think, you know, we can't guarantee this, but I think we're going to see some of the issues with prior authorization solved through this legislation. I'm really anxious to see what does come about, but we're going to obviously have to wait until it's in effect to see how many of the prior authorization problems that this cures. But I think we are going to be taking a step in the right direction. So for that reason, I would urge your support for the conference committee report for SB 356, and I'll stand for questions.
For discussion, the speaker recognizes Representative Neighbor.
Representative carrying the bill did a great job, but I do have a question on clarification that came during our caucus, and that is that some offices or clinics or whatever do not presently have the capability to do some of the electronic work. Are they going to be required, or are they going to be able to still function?
That's an excellent question. The real onus on this legislation is in the hands of the insurance providers. If you're saying that the medical clinics and hospitals don't have access to the internet, that could be a real sticking point for them, but that would have to be the case in order for it to be an issue. The portal is being designed, maintained, and utilized by the insurance providers.
So that tells us that they will be responsible for setting up these
portals.
These
the
portals.
insurance company will,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
Correct.
With that, body, I ask for your support on Senate Bill 356. We did have a good conversation, and I think this is a good bill. Thank you.
Representative Helgerson.
If the carrier could stand for a question. Sure. Thank you very much, and thank you for your work. I didn't understand it completely. So healthcare, the Senate has pulled together insurers and healthcare providers to, what was that again? Did you describe?
Well, it was an amendment on the base bill, which was innocuous in itself, but they pulled them together to discuss the implementation of, how to implement this a prior authorization access portal, and that's what that amendment is all about.
So if insurers and healthcare providers have prior authorization and an item is cost effective and will reduce money and save the lives of individuals, we should be doing that.
I would certainly think that would be a step in the right direction, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I just mentioned that because later on we'll have a discussion a little bit about second tests for women that have cancer, I believe, and how the House decided to take it out and the Senate decided to take it out rather than spend the $75,000 to save the lives of women and to give them a better life. I mention that now because we'll have a longer conversation tonight about it.
Seeing no further discussion, Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt the Conference Committee report of SB 356.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 356. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Representative Rajas votes aye. Representative Turk votes aye. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, with 118 having voted in favor and 5 against the passage of Senate Bill 356, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The Speaker recognizes Representative Thomas for a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 73.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Body Senate Bill 73 is current year funding with regards to the enrollment and the way student-based state aid is calculated. This bill will allow growing districts to utilize current year funding, current year enrollment counts for state aid, and will also allow the use of the previous year's enrollment. There was a little bit, we passed this bill off the floor, we passed this language last year, and there was a little bit of heartburn about going to this immediately. So this was amended that will allow in the 24-25 school year districts to utilize previous 2-year average before the 25-26 school year, where it will be current year and previous year for purposes of state aid. And with that, I will happily stand for questions.
For discussion, the Speaker recognizes Representative Stogsdill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The previous representative did a good job of explaining this bill. It does give school districts more flexibility as far as determining enrollment for funding and so on, and I would highly encourage you to support this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion, Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of the Conference Committee report.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 73. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, with 120 having voted in favor and 3 against the passage of Senate Bill 73, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The Speaker recognizes Representative Thomas for a motion to adopt the Agree to Disagree report for Senate Bill 438.
Morning, body. Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I move to adopt the Agree to Disagree Conference Committee report and then a new conference committee be appointed. But first, I'll explain the bill because that's what the sheet tells me to. This was a conference committee report. This started with the base bill, the AOK bill, which was carried almost unanimously on the floor. We added a couple pieces to it. The HEROES Act legislation that passed almost unanimously, the nursing scholarship expansion bill, which was 2645, which passed almost unanimously. We also added House Bill 2731, which had to do with the state board and reporting requirements. And then the blueprint for literacy piece, which is a big piece of it, that the Senate passed. We passed it out of our committee with several requested amendments from the proponents. What What that basically does is it starts, there's Regency Centers for Reading. It adds a $500 stipend per teacher who gets their certification in the science of reading. It's basically a bill that focuses on making sure teachers know how to teach reading so our kids can be better off. So with that, I'll happily stand here and answer questions.
For discussion, the speaker recognizes Representative Stockstill.
And the former representative did a good job of describing the bill. Unfortunately, I was the disagree and the agree to disagree. And there's some very good parts of this bill. This bill should have been separated and had some very good things about scholarships for teachers, nurses, so on like that. But it also certainly took rights and responsibilities away from the State Board of Education and our local boards of education, and put those responsibilities and rights in the legislature here. And last week we had a couple of representatives that came to the podium here and pointed out that correctly pointed out that the State Board of Education is not a member of the Kansas Legislature. It's not a member of the judiciary. It's not a member of the executive branch. It is totally separate. Those people are elected to do a job by the same people who elect us to do a job, and it seems like every year we come back and try to take over their responsibilities and put those into the legislature here. And I would highly object to that. I think most teachers, administrators, school board members, and so on would also agree with that. So I would like to go back and try to iron that out. So thank you very much.
Representative Chuck Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted you to know that Representative Aaron Coleman a couple years ago is eligible for this HERO scholarship. He called me the other night and he was real excited about that. And he's trying to make life better for himself. So we voted for that 120-0. So I'm real happy for Aaron. And if you ever get a chance, I hope you congratulate him and encourage him to go on and have a good life. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I do think it's worth pointing out that when the state board adopts policies and we codify them into law, I don't understand why that would be an issue. So with that, I move to adopt the agree to disagree conference committee report and then a new conference committee be appointed.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. And the motion passes. The Speaker appoints Representative Thomas, Estes, and Stogsdill as conferees on part of the House. Representatives Thomas, Estes, and Stogsdill are appointed to replace Representatives Sutton, Penn, and Neighbor as conferees on Senate Bill 19. Messages from the governor, the clerk will read.
House Bills 2590, 2604, 2605, 2632, 2661, and 2783 have been signed. Approved April 4th, 2024. Laura Kelly, Governor.
Are there announcements? Speaker recognizes Representative Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House elections and Senate Fed and State will conference immediately upon recess on House Bills 2614, 2618. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. House Judiciary and Senate Judiciary will also conference immediately following recess in room 582. Thank you.
Representative Stogsdill.
Democrats will have agenda meeting at 4 o'clock, room 152 South. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Seeing no further announcements, the speaker recognizes the majority leader for a motion to recess. Oh. Representative Robinson.
Thank you. I forgot, I did not, okay. Good afternoon. We have a resolution commemorating the 70th anniversary of Brown versus Topeka, which is taking place the 18th of May, and we have a resolution. I don't know if I'm supposed to read this entire resolution or share it. For the people that would like to co-sponsor the resolution, have a copy of it. And I apologize for hitting the wrong button or not hitting it at all. Thank you very much.
Seeing no further announcements, the speaker recognizes the majority leader for a motion to recess.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Calendar, Republicans will calendar at 4 p.m. Mr. Speaker, I move the House stand in recess until 5 p.m.
You've all heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The House is in recess. The House will be in order. Messages from the Senate. The clerk will read.
The Senate adopts the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 455. The Senate announced the appointment of Senators Peck, Glaze, and Holland to replace Senators Longbine, Fagan, Holscher as conferees on House Bill 2097. The Senate adopts the Conference Committee report, agree to disagree on Senate Bill 438, and has appointed Senators Baumgardner, Erickson, and Sykes as second conferees on part of the Senate. The Senate adopts the Conference Committee report to agree to disagree on Senate substitute for House Bill 2070 and has appointed Senators Warren, Wilborn, and Corson as second conferees on part of the Senate. The Senate adopts the Conference Committee report on Senate substitute for House Bill 2036. The Senate announced the appointment of Senators Erickson, Dietrich, and Sykes to replace Senators Longbine, Fag, and Holscher as Senate conferees on Senate Bill 19. The Senate adopts the Conference Committee report on bills, Senate Bill 359, House Bill 2532, House Bill 2560, House Bill 2711, and House Bill 2787.
The speaker recognizes Representative Concanon for a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 115.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, body, this is the Child Advocate Act. The long-awaited Office of the Child Advocate. This bill has had a long history. Last year, we passed it 116-7. We started conferencing on this last year. Things kind of fell apart. So we resumed this year and had some good negotiations. But the House passed one bill, the Senate passed another, and so we were trying to put the two bills together, and that just took a little while. There were a lot of things that both bills had. It gave the office independence and freedom from political influence, the ability to track and respond to different trends that will improve the system. Some of the differences is we took our position, the House position, on the qualifications for the child advocate. We had a difference in the definition of a child, and so our position, we took the House position, which was consistent with the Sync Code. The Senate was pretty firm on asking for subpoena power, and after much debate, we accepted that with guardrails, and we established a time frame and some specifics about procedure. What else? There was a lot of discussion between confidentiality and absolute privilege.
We went with the confidentiality and immunity. There was a lot of technical stuff that we cleaned up that made it consistent with the sync code. And then the final move that we made was this was a bill that had another bill amended into it. So we asked to have everything removed, and they accepted that. And then we accepted their appointment process, which will be the governor appoints with Senate approval. So, Mr. Speaker, I move to adopt the conference committee report.
For discussion, the speaker recognizes Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For those of you that have been here a while, I appreciate your patience while we work through this with the Senate. I commend my chair, I commend my vice chair on our negotiations. The compromise really took a while, but I feel like we've got a good product here. And I'm honestly, I'm a little bit proud to present to you all the conference committee report on SB 115, and I hope you will support this motion. I think it's a step in the right direction and something necessary for the kids in the state of Kansas. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Seeing no further discussion, Representative, you may close.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Before I close, I just wanted to say thank you to my vice chair and also to the ranking member who has worked on this for 6 years. I've worked on it for a long time, for 4 years, but I really have to commend him. It took a couple years for him to bring me along, and so I ask for your support, and I close on my motion.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 115. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Seeing 10 hands, calls in order. Doorman will secure the doors. Clerk will read the roll.
Representatives Alcala, Garber, Hauser, Landwehr, Potter Partial, and Wassinger.
Representative Wassinger votes aye. Not seeing 10 hands, calls raised. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, with 117 having voted in favor and 3 against the passage of Senate Bill 115, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The Speaker recognizes Representative Proctor for a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 14.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Body Senate Bill 14 contains two bills. The first one is House Bill 2512, which passed out of this chamber earlier this session, 97-23. What that bill does is in 2024, it requires that clerks add 4 hours on Saturday of early voting, the Saturday before an election. And in 2025, it ends the Monday early voting by noon and moves the deadline back to 7 p.m. on Sunday. This bill was drafted and constructed in coordination with the Clerks Association, because a lot of our rural clerks, especially those offices that are 1 or 2 man or woman bands, it's really tough for them to continue to do early voting up till noon, reset all the poll books and get all their polling places, often many, many miles away from the county seat, ready for Election Day. The other bill that's in this bill is House Bill 2513, which removes the 3-day grace period. I want to talk for a minute about why I brought this bill and why I'm before you today talking about it. So we passed a similar measure last year. It was vetoed by the governor and we didn't have the votes to override. And I was ready to just drop the issue and not bring it back. But in the fall, I went around to a bunch of election offices, including rural election office. And we had heard during the debate of the 3-day grace period that 0 ballots were being counted in rural counties after Election Day. And so I asked this clerk, so you didn't get any ballots? And she said, no, we got ballots. We couldn't count any of them because they weren't postmarked. The statute in Kansas says that if a ballot shows up after Election Day during that 3-day grace period and it's not postmarked, it can't be counted. And so we are disenfranchising hundreds, maybe thousands of rural voters. We won't know the exact number until the end of this election, 2024, because the Secretary of State's office is going to be collecting data on it. But we are disenfranchising voters who did everything right. They requested their ballot correctly, they filled out their ballot correctly, they put it in the mail and got it to their election office by 3 days after Election Day, but we can't count their ballot because the post office didn't postmark the ballot. If we do away with the 3-day grace period, then the ballot doesn't have to be postmarked because you know it was cast before 7 p.m. on election night. What this bill does, in addition, is it adds 2 days of early voting. So early voting will begin 22 days before the election rather than 20 days before the election. It adds 2 days for voters to mail-in ballots because now instead of the mail-in ballots going out at 20 days, the mail-in ballots will go out at 22 days. Another thing that it does is it moves the deadline to request a mail-in ballot back a week, because right now we let you continue to request a mail-in ballot until 6 days before the election. There's no way the election office is going to get your ballot through the mail and you're going to get it back by the deadline. So it moves that date back. The House Bill 2512, moving the Monday, includes the amendment that the minority leader brought during the debate to give election officers the leeway on a case-by-case basis to allow someone to vote on Monday if extenuating circumstances should occur. And I think I'll stop there and stand for questions.
For discussion, the Speaker recognizes Representative Woodard.
Mr. Speaker, the carrier of the conference committee report did a great job explaining what's in the bill. This was one that we had an agree to disagree on. I think the biggest sticking point, while I appreciate the addition of the 2 days on the front end of early voting and mail ballots going out 2 days earlier, it is, especially being from a larger county, getting rid of that 3-day grace period in 2023 in Johnson County and in 2022 was an average of 4,800 votes that came in the grace period. And so that's a number of votes that would not be counted if we were to enact this law. I do, for the record, want to make it very clear to Kansans that if they're going to get their mail ballot, it's much quicker to put it in a ballot drop box than it is going to go through the mail process. But as we've had discussions about this in the past, when you are mailing a ballot, it is leaving the state of Kansas to go to a processing center before it's going to come back to go to your county election office. I do appreciate the addition of the early voting days. I appreciate the moving up the deadline to request a ballot, just because, as the chair said, if you're requesting a ballot, there are many folks that are successfully requesting it within the timeline. It's not making it to them before the election day. And so, but with the underlying piece of this being the elimination of the 3-day grace period, that's just too many votes that would not be counted. I do appreciate the conversation that we had with the county election officers and county clerks. In those instances where they are having ballots come in without ballot postmarks, I would also want to work with the county clerks to make sure that they're talking to their postmaster, that they're talking to their post office to make sure that they are postmarking ballots. You know, if there is a case where there's 100 coming in and there's not a single postmark, that's less a problem about, one, we don't have any control over the USPS, but also want to make sure that our county clerks have a relationship with their postmaster to encourage them to go, to make sure that those ballots are getting postmarked as well. So probably no surprise to my chair, I'll be voting no, and would urge the body to vote against the CCR for Senate Bill 14. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For further discussion, the speaker recognizes Minority Leader Vic Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With my friend from Leavenworth, you'll do a couple questions. That was one. You said you visited some counties and spoke with county clerks about, I'm talking about the 3-day grace period issue.
That is true, yes.
And how many of those county election officers did you speak to?
I spoke to the four election commissioners for the 4 largest counties. I spoke to the Rick Pivo, who's the Harvey County Clerk, and I spoke to the Wabunsee County Clerk, Abby Amy. And I spoke to the Leavenworth Clerk.
Harvey, Leavenworth, who was the third one?
Wabunsee.
Wabunsee.
And then, yeah.
And did you get the same story from all of them, that they were having trouble with mail not being postmarked?
It varied by county. The larger counties had less of a problem. The more urban counties had less of a problem. They do get ballots that are not postmarked in those counties as well.
And were you able to, was that anecdotal evidence, or did you observe these ballot envelopes that were not postmarked?
I did not observe them, but I talked to the election officer, and I trust the election officers would not lie about something like that.
Well, I wouldn't say I wouldn't allege that they were lying. I think, I do think there's some misunderstanding about how some of these ballots are, or the envelopes are postmarked. As I understand, many of them are postmarked by use of a barcode, and I'm not sure every election officer understands that. But personally, thank you, sir. I agree with my ranking member that if there is a county having a problem with their post office not postmarking ballots, first of all, I don't understand why that would be occurring. I don't know about any of you. I've never gotten a piece of mail that wasn't postmarked. So I think some further investigation of that issue is required. When this bill passed in 2017, it was passed because of service from the post office suffering. It is safe to say that since the bill passed, and the whole purpose of the bill was to address the fact that delivery was suffering, it's gotten worse. Anyone that I talk to that's contemplating mailing their ballot, I tell them, please mail it as soon as you can to ensure that it gets there. I think the point was well taken that the drop boxes are a better alternative to ensure that it's taken on time. Nonetheless, if someone chooses to utilize the post office, it's not their fault if the post office is dilatory in delivering it. And they should not be disenfranchised by taking away this grace period. It's too bad that we had a bill that I supported that was initiated to assist the clerks in the timely processing of elections by granting them some additional free time on Monday to do things other than process early votes. And I thought that was a good idea, and I appreciate the chair receiving my amendment as a friendly amendment to tie up a little bit of a hole in that process. I do appreciate that. And it's sad for me that we took a good bill that was aimed at helping the clerks, and we've let the politicians amend it such that I cannot support it. And I, again, if the bill reaches the governor's desk, will implore her to please exercise her pen to veto it so that these people who do benefit from that 3 days, and there are literally tens of thousands of voters that do, continue to enjoy that privilege. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. You know, it's not often that we as a body take away the opportunity for people to vote. We've always considered it a rite of passage. We encourage people to vote. And yet here we are, the carrier of the amendment or the bill said he had been in contact with several small rural areas. We have 105 counties, 105. And yet we heard some of the big ones who were not in favor of it, and about 4 small ones. That's not even 50% or 25% of the counties or the people in Kansas. I would dare say if you went home and said, I took your right away on those 3 days, you might get a little flack. And you get flack that is correct. Because why are we paying, or why are our citizens being hung out to dry because the post office cannot do their job? Our current postmaster is the one that shut down several sorting places. That has diminished and caused a lot of problem for people across the United States. They don't get their meds on time. They may not get their bills on time. Oh, they pay them, but they don't get to the company on time, and so they're charged interest. I've gotten mail that wasn't postmarked. In fact, I could take and reuse that stamp. Is it right? No, but I bet you all have at one time or another. They're not doing their job, but why should the voters of Kansas or anywhere else have to suffer because a department cannot do their job? The first part of this bill is good, but this part of it is horrible. Absolutely horrible. And if you want to disenfranchise voters, go ahead. But I think it will be important that we spread the word. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I could not agree more with one thing that the previous speaker said, which is we should not be disenfranchising voters because the post office is failing to do its job and postmark ballots, which is why if we do away with the 3-day grace period, it won't matter if the ballot is postmarked because unless they got in a time machine and mailed it back from the next Tuesday, that ballot was cast by 7 p.m. on Election Day. That's why we're here today. And we do have data. Last session, the Secretary of State told us that 0 ballots were counted in rural counties after Election Day in that 3-day grace period. So we know that, it is a small sample right now, but when the Secretary of State collects data for this election, which they've already asked the clerks to give them the data on, we are going to find out that we are disenfranchising hundreds, if not thousands, of rural voters and voters in urban districts as well, because not all of the ballots are getting postmarked. I'd like to answer a couple other concerns that I heard very quickly as I was talking to folks about this bill. The first concern I heard was, well, because you're moving the voter registration back 22 to 23 days before instead of 21 days, you're effectively, because that's a Sunday, moving it back to Friday. I've talked to the Secretary of State's office. If you register online by any means by that Sunday, your registration will be valid. If you mail in your registration and it has a postmark, and that postmark's before that Sunday, your registration will be valid. There is a federal law, the MVRA, which requires that if an election office receives a voter registration request that isn't postmarked, they have to accept it if it arrived within 10 days of the election. So this has no impact beyond the 2 days that we intended to move voter registration, because you have to have everybody registered before you start early voting. The second thing, the governor, when she vetoed this bill, a similar bill last year without those 2 extra days, said that she was doing it because military personnel were being disenfranchised. The UOCAVA, the federal law on overseas and uniform voting, requires that we get them their ballot 45 days before the election and requires that their mail-in ballot be in by election night. So this bill has, just like the last bill, has 0 impact on military voters. And I'll wrap up by saying Kansas is lying to voters. Not intentionally, but we're lying to voters. When we tell voters that they can request their mail-in ballot 6 days before the election and they're going to get it in time and be able to get it back in time, that's a lie. That's not true. That is just not feasible with today's mail system. We are lying to voters, a lot of voters, when we tell them that if you get your ballot into the election office within 3 days after the election, we'll go ahead and count it. Because many, many, many of those ballots are coming in without postmarks, and we're not counting them. We're disenfranchising many more people, and the numbers will come back. And when the numbers come back, I hope that the folks that were opposing this because they said I only had anecdotal evidence will be in support of this measure when we find out that we're disenfranchising hundreds or thousands of voters. So, Mr. Speaker, with that, I move to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 14.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 14. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. As every member had the opportunity to record their vote, the clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, with 73 having voted in favor and 48 against the passage of Senate Bill 14, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The Speaker recognizes Representative Tarwater for a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 271.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 271 was the drone bill that we passed not too long ago. We made a couple of changes. The first thing we did was add some language from a finance bill that passed that same day that prohibits the state from contracting with foreign principals to purchase goods and services. It didn't fit in the bill that it was in, so we moved it over to the drone bill because it made better sense there. We also, to protect the fiscal note, when we reimburse for a drone that we take from the law enforcement, we will depreciate it over time so that we can save a little bit on the fiscal note. They have about a 7-year shelf life, is what we understand, and we are depreciating it 1.5% a month, which would match that. So with that, I'll stand for questions. Mr. Speaker, I move to adopt the conference committee report.
For discussion, the Speaker recognizes Representative Probst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The chairman of our Commerce Committee did a fine job explaining this. Basically, I would say we didn't make too many big changes in conference, nothing that causes me much concern, and it was explained very well. I'd say if you didn't like this before, you probably still don't like it, and if you did like it, you'll like it. I personally don't think it's going to accomplish what we think, and we did create a new fund that I suspect will last for a long time and cost a lot of money, but I voted for it, and I'll do that same thing again.
Representative Tarwater, you may close.
Thank you, sir. I close.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 271. The clerk will open the roll, and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Hoheisel votes aye. Representative Helgerson votes no. Are there any further changes? Seeing none. With 86 having voted in favor and 35 against the passage of Senate Bill 2, members will be in their seats. Having received the constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. Clerk will record the vote. Now you can get up. The Speaker recognizes Representative Sutton for a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 423.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. SB 423 only combines 4 bills, so we don't have to be nearly as nervous about this one. All 4 of these have passed the House. Senate Bill HB 2530 is the first one. That removes automobile club from the definition of human. Not a huge stretch there. That was passed by the House at 118 to 2. Apparently 2 people think that automobile clubs are humans. HB 2715 is putting an up to in certain fees so that the insurance commissioner has the authority to reduce those fees if it's possible or prudent rather. That wouldn't pass the House 119 to 0. Senate Bill 423 was regarding the Committee on Surety Bonds and Insurance Governing Boards, just adjusting the number of board members and the frequency of their meetings. Again, not terribly exciting, but it passed the House 122 to 1. Now here's the one that might be a sticking point. HB 2834 is included in this package. This is the one that transferred the state employee health plan from the Department of Administration to the Insurance Department. As you'll recall, 4 years ago, we moved the state employee health plan from the KDHE to the Department of Administration, thinking that the person who handled benefits or the agency that handled benefits would be best able to handle the health plan. Since then, we've found that maybe that's not the best match, and so we're looking at the insurance department to handle the insurance program. Seems like a better match, and I think we're going to have more success with that. That one passed the House 81 to 42. Overall, regarding SB 423 Conference Committee report, I'd say if you liked HB 2834 before, you probably still do. If you didn't like it before, you probably still don't. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. The carrier of the bill did an excellent job of describing it to you. The two parts in here, or the three parts, are good bills. But the last one, in my purview, is something that we jumped at a little bit too quickly. And the reason I signed the agree to disagree is because I think everybody needs to hear their vote or their voice heard. I don't like the bill. And so in essence, I will be voting against it. And the reason for that is this bill was brought at the last minute, around March the 8th. We had discussion on it. There were only 3 proponents, only 3. One was a group who has had trouble getting insurance to pay. They thought maybe they'd get something different with this. The other was a representative, and then there was a written only. That's not a lot of support for taking something that Alvarez put in their report as a need for efficiency. And the department has shown efficiencies have taken place. They did just what Alvarez said. One of the things we need to remember is that the insurance is a policy, and I repeat, policy agency. It doesn't give out claims and master those, even though you would say, oh, insurance. That's not what they do. The Department of Administration also presented in their opposition testimony the fact that they had just recently put out a bid for some IT equipment that involved this very department, and that if we were to change it, they would have to take that back and redo that bid. There was conversation that the insurance department recently moved. We all know that. The issue was, do they have enough room? Oddly enough, we've had 2 different reports, and both of them have come from the insurance department. One of them says, yes, we have the room, and the other one says, no, we don't. So if it turns out they do not have the room to facilitate this group, they're going to have to look for a new location, and they will be moving. So if you look at the physical impact, which we don't have a complete breakdown here because it's not possible to get it at this point, we may just be erasing all of those efficiencies. I don't know why we do these reports if we don't take them seriously, especially when they've done their job and they've proven to be efficient. That's why on this particular bill, I stand opposed to HB 2715 because I think it's a matter of, I think it's 2715. I think that is a matter that it's 2834, sorry. That is a matter that we need to take very seriously. And because if we're going to start moving departments every 4 years, we're never going to make any headway on efficiencies or anything else. I would appreciate a no vote. The other bills in here, I want you to know because I've asked the insurance department. They do not cover dates or any guidelines from federal government or NIAC. They are things the insurance department would like to have but they're not going to suffer anything if they don't pass until next year. So I've cleared that because I didn't want to jeopardize anything that would put us in harm's way as far as the agency goes. So thank you, and I ask for a no vote on that one.
Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I stand opposed to this bill because it is a horrible idea to move the state employee health plan to the Insurance Commission. Now, I think we can probably most all agree our current insurance commissioner does a fabulous job. I think you'll find people voted and donated to her campaign on both sides of this aisle and feel very confident in her abilities. This is not about that. What this is about is a gross conflict of interest that would be created for you and your families and your constituents that are on the state employee health plan. You would be asking the Insurance Commission to both negotiate your plan and then enforce the plan if something didn't go your way, which, as I understand it from testimony, is why we are here today. So that's not good. When you look at the Insurance Commission website, it says their job is to regulate, educate, and advocate. They are there to be the people's advocate. They are not there to perform HR functions, which we do have a department that does that called the Department of Administration. Now, I ask you to look down the road a little bit. The insurance commissioner is a highly qualified woman who perhaps might look to move on to another job. And maybe we would find somebody in one of our legislative chambers who would think, I would be really good at being the insurance commissioner. I could really get some stuff done. Okay, what if that person won that job, didn't think that preventive life-saving and cost-saving healthcare was worth $1.63 per policy? What if that person from one of our legislative chambers did not think your wife, your sister, your mother, your daughter, or yourself was worth $1.63 to your health plan to potentially save their life, but to most certainly save healthcare costs? What if they didn't think that catching 2 or 3 cases of breast cancer was worth saving $155,000 at a cost of $75,000? I think that's maybe something we should think about, who we want to be our advocate for our and our families' insurance needs. Thank you.
Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A couple of things that came up there. First off, the insurance department currently handles customer service for all insurance companies. Whenever there's a problem, they're the ones who take the calls. And as you may note, that's one of the major concerns that we're currently having with our state employee health plan is not responding to customer complaints and concerns. Also, regarding the A&M study, that thing cost us about $3 to $4 million, probably the biggest boondoggle ever. I don't think we've still, even by now, saved the amount of money that it cost. So I'm not sure that I would call that a strong efficiency. With that all said, Mr. Speaker, I do move to adopt the conference committee report on Senate Bill 423.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 423. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, with 80 having voted in favor and 41 against the passage of Senate Bill 423, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The Speaker recognizes Representative Adam Smith for a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on House Bill 2036.
Good evening, everyone. Senate substitute for House Bill 2036 contains the following measures. It is a reduction in the top marginal individual income tax rate from 5.7 down to 5.5. It is an exemption on Social Security benefit, income tax on your Social Security benefits, effective immediately. It increases the standard deduction amounts in tax code for single filers from $3,500 to $5,000, for head of household from $6,000 to $7,500, and for married filers or joint filers from $8,000 up to $10,000. This does also increase the child and dependent care tax credit to 100% of the federal deductible amount. This reduces the privilege tax rates that banks pay and financial institutions pay proportionately to the corporate rate reduction in the Apex language that we passed several years ago. This does abolish the local ad valorem tax reduction fund and the city-county revenue sharing fund. It does not abolish the special city-county highway fund. This does increase the amount of the residential exemption on your appraised value of your property from $42,000 currently in statute up to $100,000, and it reduces the statewide mill levy from 20 mills down to 19.5. This also accelerates the elimination of the state sales tax on food to zero, effective July 1st. That, Mr. Speaker, I move to adopt the Conference Committee report on the Senate substitute for House Bill 2036, and I'll stand for questions.
For discussion, the Speaker recognizes Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, anytime that I have the opportunity to come up to this well, I truly count it an honor. Each one of us, regardless of what party affiliation we are, was elected by the majority of our constituents. They're ultimately who we're accountable to. I spoke first at this well about 6 years ago now, and I vowed to do what was right for them, not what was right for me, not what was right for my reelection campaign. Not too long ago, matter of fact, last week, our body came together in a rare display of unanimous consent. For some of us, it was a huge victory. For some of us, it was a huge disappointment. But the reality is we came together, united, and we sent a tax bill across the rotunda that took care of many Kansans. Everybody benefited. The lower tiers, property tax, Social Security tax elimination, a bill that every member of this body could unite behind, and we sent it to the Senate, and they trashed it. Now, there may be reasons, I don't know, and to be quite honest, I don't care. But the bill that we're presented here today is inferior on so many levels. Now, some may have a different reason for agreeing with this, and some may have another reason for disagreeing with it. But the reality is Kansans deserve better. Kansans deserve a tax bill that represents true savings in their pocket. And that bill was the bill that was sent across the rotunda unanimously. And so, Mr. Speaker, I make a substitute motion to not adopt the conference committee report and that a new conference committee be appointed.
The speaker recognizes Speaker Hawkins.
Now, that is kind of funny, isn't it? Speaker recognizes Speaker Hawkins. You know, today, you have a decision to make. You have a decision to make if you're going to, well, let me back up. Let me back up just a little bit. Actually, I love some of the things that the previous speaker said. We did have quite a day when we passed Senate Bill 300 across this body. That was a glorious day for so many of us. And I think if we hadn't had Senate Bill 300, we wouldn't look at this bill quite the way we look at it today. We would probably look at it as, you know something, we're trimming 0.2% off the top rate, which for some of you would say, yeah, that's the wrong thing for us to do. And for others, you would say that's a great thing to do. The bill we are presented with today has many of the same provisions that our bill had. It has the sales tax on food in there, which my friends on this side absolutely want. Not something I wanted. I'd actually kind of like to not have it in there. But in Senate Bill 300, certainly we compromised on that. It has Social Security tax, or the income tax on Social Security completely repealed. I think every single one of us, maybe not every single, but almost all of us like that provision. My friends over here, a couple of them are smiling. I guess the point, I could go through every single piece of this bill, and you're going to say there's something in here I love, and there's something in here I hate, something I don't like. Probably for me, only having half a mil taken off is something I don't like. Matter of fact, that would be my hate. That would be the thing that I hate the worst about this bill, is the fact that only got a half a mil. But where is actually the tax relief on property tax in this bill? It's actually not in the mills. It's actually in the homestead, the exemption. That 100,000 exemption produces $127 for every person that has a house. At 100,000, it produces $127 in tax relief. The mills actually, for the lower houses, actually produces very little. And I guarantee you, if I called on my friend, the tax chair or the vice chair, they could tell you exactly how much that is, and it's not very much. So when people say that we're not getting tax relief, you're wrong. We are getting tax relief. This bill is a good bill, just not as good as what we had with Senate Bill 300. And we all know that. So now you have to make a decision, and that's really where we're coming to, is we have to make a decision. Are we going to decide, because it doesn't come up to what we love the most a week and a half ago, that we're going to trash it and we're going to stop everything and we're going to go home tomorrow evening without a tax bill? Or are we going to say, you know, it's part of the process, this is actually not bad. In fact, pretty much everybody out there is going to get tax relief from this, and most people don't know what we know. Most people don't know that we already had the best. We just don't have quite the best today. But we do have great tax relief for our people, and we can go home and we can say we have tax relief. and they'll feel it. I would venture to say, matter of fact, I would bet before we put our heads down on our pillows tonight, if we send it back, you know what the headline's gonna be? House scuttles tax relief for Kansans. Now you get to try to message that one. Because I know what the press does. They always use the most hellacious headline that they can get. House scuttles tax relief. A single one of us want to scuttle tax relief. We want our folks to get tax relief. And we have the ability to make that decision tonight and not send this back, and let's have a debate on the bill that's before us and hopefully pass it, and let's go home and deliver tax relief to our constituents who dearly need tax relief. I love every one of you. Every one of you have to make that decision for yourself. But I think truly it's a decision you really need to think about before we finish up tonight. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Speaker recognizes Representative Sawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a little uncomfortable speaking after the Speaker. I rise in support of the motion. You know, we did really good work in this body last week. Senate Bill 300 was a really good bill. And the Speaker of the House gave a very good speech last week, talking about how this body worked together and truly passed a bipartisan bill. It was historic. Yeah, I've been here a long time. You don't pass big controversial bills like that 123 to nothing. But we did. That was pretty amazing. And it was good work. And I believe we ought to have the opportunity to go to conference committee and discuss our work with the Senate. That's the way the process is supposed to work. Our opportunity, we're still going to be here. You know, we're not adjourning tonight. I think we should send this back, let our conferees sit down with the Senate, let them see how good a work we did last week. Senate Bill 300 is clearly better than this bill. It's broad tax relief for everybody in Kansas. And it's better than the current bill we're working on. I think the work we did deserves that opportunity. This is our chance. This is our chance to sit down and discuss Senate Bill 300 with the Senate. So I would urge you to support this motion to not adopt the conference committee report and a new conference committee be appointed.
Speaker recognizes Representative Vic Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't think there will ever be a better time for me to say this, but I love you too, Mr. Speaker. If you were listening to the Speaker a moment ago, he said one very important thing that caught my ear, and that was, if it wasn't for Senate Bill 300, we wouldn't be having this discussion. Mr. Speaker, there was Senate Bill 300. It is real. It exists. It went to the other side expecting to be treated like we would any other bills that pass between us, and that is given some respect that that was the position of this House. It was totally disrespected. It was never considered. It was never discussed. And we are entitled to at least have them act like they care what our position is. Why anyone would ever want to serve in that chamber is beyond me.
Seeing no further discussion, Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I am truly glad there is so much love here. You know, we just heard from a few folks, and again, nothing in this body is personal, but let's be real. We heard that this isn't a bad tax relief bill. We heard about making sure we get to go home. We heard about headlines. Well, how about this headline? House fights for more tax relief that Kansans deserve. Or maybe it's past time the House finally takes a stand. Folks, today is that day. Let us rise up and be united and send a message that Kansans deserve more. I close.
All right. So a yes vote sends this back to conference committee. A no vote keeps this bill on the floor. I will remind the gallery that there is a rule that prohibits any photographs or photography of the boards if a division is called. If you do so, the Sergeant of Arms will immediately escort you from the gallery. You've all heard the motion. All in favor, signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion carries. Out of order. The Speaker recognizes Representative Humphreys for a motion to adopt the Agree to Disagree Report, House Bill 2070. The conferees on part of the House for House Bill 2036 are Adam Smith, Burkamp, and Sawyer. Representative Humphreys.
This is going to be boring compared to what we just said. Body, I am here to talk about House Bill 20, Senate sub for House Bill 2070. We had it cross our floor and we voted it across our floor on March 26. It is the third-party litigation funding transparency bill. It also has a piece in it to send a report to the Judicial Council. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I move to adopt the Agree to Disagree Conference Committee report and that a new conference committee be appointed, and I will answer any questions.
Representative Osmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Guys, come on. This is my first conference committee report. Please don't kick me off of this. I worked really hard. We're all friends here. We established that in the previous debate. We are all friends. And I think friends can tell friends that this bill 2070 or the substitute motion for the bill 2510 are terrible bills. I'm allowed as a friend to be honest with you. It is a terrible bill and we shouldn't pass it. So again, I guess to quote War, the band, why can't we be friends? 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 Please vote no on this motion to agree to disagree. Thank you.
Representative Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've already heard this bill and we voted it out largely along party lines. That's why there's an agreement to disagree. And you may recall that one of the objections of those who opposed it was that we really, one of the concerns we had in putting the bill forward was possibility of what I'll call litigation terrorism. That is, foreign countries, entities coming in and using our litigation process to strategically attack businesses, strategic businesses such as ag or aerospace in Kansas. And the opponents said, well, prove that that's actually happening. Prove that Russia or China or North Korea are using that method to undermine our society. I wanted to bring to the attention of the body that on March 28th of this year, a few days ago, Bloomberg reported that a company called A1, which is owned by Russian oligarchs with ties to Putin, have been financing litigations around the world, including in the United States. And there's no reporting. We don't really know. They aren't regulated. They're deep pockets. They're investors. And they can put millions into a case without appearing on the court record. And so I think we do now have evidence that they know very well how to and are in fact using litigation, third-party litigation funding to invest in and litigate cases around the world. The one case that was reported in the Bloomberg was A1, they said it had spent $20 million in an ongoing bankruptcy litigation in New York and London. With that, Mr. Speaker, I urge the adoption of the agree to disagree.
Representative, you may close.
Thank you. I close and move my motion.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. The Speaker appoints Representatives Humphreys. Representatives Humphreys, Lewis, and Osmond as conferees and part of the House. Are there announcements? Representative Thomas.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. House Education Conference Committee will meet on Senate Bill 19 at 8 o'clock, room 159 South. Yeah, thank you.
Representative Concanon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to remind everybody that tomorrow is Wear Blue Day for Child Abuse Prevention Month, and there will be a pinwheel planting event at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Humphreys.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, House Judiciary, Senate Judiciary will conference in 582 immediately after recessing.
Representative Ellis.
Veterans Committee Conference at, I think, 582? I think it's 528 and 710.
Seeing no further announcements, the Speaker recognizes the Majority Leader for a motion to recess. Delay my last. Representative Stockstill. Never mind. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House recess until 8:30 p.m.
You've all heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The House is in recess. The House will be in order. With Speaker recognizes Representative Francis for a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 142.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So Senate Bill 142, this is about the third time you guys have voted on this one. And when it got to the Senate, they sent it back because they wanted the prima facie evidence part taken out of the portion that dealt with talking on the phone when you're going through either a work zone with workers present, active crossroad or school crossing area, or if you're under the age of 18. So we met this morning and we took that part of it out. But if you'll remember right, this is the one that would require drivers approaching any stopped vehicles displaying hazard warnings to proceed with due caution or move into another lane away from the stopped vehicle. It would create specific penalties for failure to move over for an emergency vehicle and a law enforcement officer, emergency medical service provider, or firefighter is injured or killed. And it would prohibit the use of a mobile telephone, again, while you're in a work zone with workers present. If you're in a school crossing, an active school crossing area, or if you're under the age of 18. So again, the piece that we took out was the part that said that holding a cell phone in your hand would constitute prima facie evidence. And with that, I'd stand for questions. Oh, and I guess I move to adopt the conference committee report.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you. The Chair of Transportation did an outstanding job just explaining it and reviewing what you have voted on several times, well, at least twice before. That part stays the same, nothing changed except for what he said, removing the provision and holding the cell phone at that particular time. So I think you're familiar with it. Vote for SB 142. Thank you.
Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I forgot to mention, last time we voted on this, it passed 102 to 18. So, Mr. Speaker, I move to adopt the conference committee report.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 142. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Mon votes aye. Representative Penn votes no. Explanation of vote? You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I originally voted for this bill, but I have since heard some disturbing thoughts on it. If the child is running by at about 45 miles an hour, you can't tell how old they are. You can't tell, looking behind them, if they have a cell phone or a device that you think to be that. The only thing that you might be able to tell is some of the other characteristics of them, which I find disturbing. So, in the spirit of profiling, I can't vote for this particular one, but feel free to vote your conscience. Thank you.
Are there any further explanation of votes? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Webb votes no. Roth, sorry. It's late. Representative Roth. No. Representative Tarwater votes no. Representative Mon votes no. Representative Landwehr votes no. Representative Murphy votes no. Representative Will Carpenter votes no. Representative Hill votes no. Representative Carlin votes no. Representative Turk votes no. Representative Cywert votes no. Are there any further changes to the votes? Seeing none. With 98 having voted in favor and 21 against the passage of Senate Bill 142, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The Speaker recognizes Representative Estes for a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 438.
Thank you. Senate Bill 438 is one that you saw recently as the AOK scholarship bill. We added some other scholarship bills to it, 2645, which also was a nursing scholarship. We added 2644, which dealt with interest rates, and we added 2646, which clarified language on the HERO scholarship. And then we added Senate Bill 544, which created the Kansas Academic Excellence Scholarship Program, mostly targeted toward students whose parents had not graduated with a baccalaureate degree. The part of this bill that's the biggest and the newest is the inclusion of Senate Bill 532, which is the blueprint for literacy. And I think of this part of the bill as a solution, because one of the things that all of us are most passionate and care about deeply, even though we don't always see the same way to get there, is education. When we look at what's going on in our schools, one of the main contributors to the results that we're getting is not all of our teachers were trained in teaching the science of reading. So this bill establishes the Literacy Advisory Committee. The director is selected by the Kansas Board of Regents, who will then be their employee, and is tasked with creating a blueprint for literacy. They will submit a plan to KBOR and the legislature by January 1 of 2025, and they will help to monitor the progress of literacy training, and explicitly states the goal is to have 100% of Kansas elementary school teachers, ESL teachers, and special ed teachers certified with a micro-credential in the science of reading. And I think that's something that's, the bill uses the word transformational, and I think that's an appropriate word. It also gives the teachers who achieve that designation a $500 stipend, and ensures that they are not charged for tuition. And it also gets into discussing overseeing screeners, and screeners help to follow the progress of a student throughout the year. The goal that the Literacy Committee is tasked with is having 50% of Kansas 3rd and 8th graders achieving a level 3 or above, and 90% of our 3rd and 8th graders achieving a level 2 or higher. It calls for progress reports so that we can stay informed, and it appropriates $10 million, so that is capped. And it requires the universities to implement the required courses by August of 2024. If not, $1 million will be clawed back from research institutions and $500 from the regional institutions. And we also made it very clear that that money could not be used for developing the courses. So I think this really is an important step to addressing how we can help our students to reach higher and do more, because we think part of what we have in common is what we believe that they can. The last part of this bill adds 2731, which we passed previously on the floor, 80 to 40, which adds real numbers to our longitudinal reports, because I think that's important information for us to have at our fingertips, especially when we're looking at the blueprint for literacy and we're talking about moving students a percentage or 4%. It's very helpful, I think, for us in our policy setting to know how much that is. And I'll be happy to stand for questions.
For discussion, the speaker recognizes Representative Stogstill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a bill that should have been two bills. There's an awful lot of good in this bill, and there's some really bad things that I think is going to come back to bite us in the legislature here. The good part is this really addresses some things that will improve teacher access to information, and it will provide better relationships between our institutions of higher learning and our public schools and so on, and that's terrific. That should have been in a bill by itself. The thing that gave me heartburn on this thing was two things. One, it requires more reports from the Kansas State Department of Education. We get about 18 reports from those people right now. And all we have, and as I say, I think I've said this before at the well, in 8 years I have on the Education Committee, I have never seen one time where the State Board of Education has turned down a request that we make for information. We usually get it immediately. And to put into law that they have to do another report, something that could be handled with a telephone call instead of legislation, I think is really an overreach for the legislature and is totally unneeded. The other thing is one line that was in the bill, and it says, on or before July 1, 2025, no school district shall use any textbooks or instructional materials that utilize, and then goes on to explain those materials. That is definitely an overreach by the legislature, but I think eventually this issue is going to have to be litigated because this is not our purview. Deciding what textbooks and what instructional materials are going to be used by our public schools is not the business of the legislature. It's the business of our local school boards and the Kansas State Department of Education and the State Board of Education. So that part really bothers me, but if we have to go to court to decide whether this body has that authority, so be it. But I think because of the good parts of this, I will probably hold my nose on the bad parts and vote yes on this bill. But I would advise you to look at this. And as I say, I think we are really overreaching on a great part of this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate all of the multiple parts of the bill that I think are wonderful. I only want to talk about the Kansas Education Opportunity Scholarship. I caught this last minute that we're slipping in, getting rid of the Kansas Ethnic Minority Scholarship and replacing it with the Kansas Education Opportunity Scholarship. I was really glad that in higher ed budget, we did have a hearing on a bill that would look to address some of the concerns with the current scholarship based on some of the recent federal court rulings. And the new scholarship would require someone to be a Kansas resident who is a first-generation college student, which we know that are disproportionately represents people from underrepresented backgrounds, but it doesn't look like this new scholarship would be merit-based. And I also want to just highlight that, you know, a lot of the students that currently qualify for the Kansas Ethnic Minority Scholarship may not be first generation. They may have parents who did go to college, but maybe are in lower earning jobs or social workers or nurses or things like that, that they still have financial need and can't afford to go to college that are currently eligible for a scholarship, but not. So I have a little concern with that part of the bill, just as I think the House committee had a really great discussion about some potential solutions. And this part specifically seems like we're trying to fix something with maybe just not quite the right answer just yet. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Haskins.
Would my colleague, the carrier of the bill, stand for a question? Thank you. I just wanted to follow up. The report that we're adding, does it still have the 5-year phase out into it?
It does include a 5-year sunset, and reports required by the legislature are not unprecedented at all. In fact, the State Board of Education presented us with a list that I think had a ballpark about a dozen different reports on there, and I tried to remove a report, and it turned out I didn't have to because one of them wasn't there. So we didn't add an additional report to what they thought they had to do because one faded away.
Okay, thank you very much. I agree with my colleague about let's maybe be better partners when it comes to KSDE. But the report, the colleague does add, the 5-year sunset to it, and it is data that will help us identify. I also just want to take a moment to state that publicly, I have always said that if you're a teacher, then you should teach, and we should allow our teachers to teach. Dictating what they should teach or how they should teach should not be our job. However, working at the Kansas State Department of Ed in association with the Kansas Board of Regents, I've always said there's a huge gap in between the educating of our students, and the blueprint is a really good tool. It gives people to the table to give a voice, and that they didn't have before. Plus, it gives more money to teachers. So I think the bill is good with a little bad, but I'll be voting for it. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the conversation that we've had, and I'm certainly willing to take a look at the future about the issue that our friend from the academic world mentioned. But for now, I move that we adopt a conference committee report for SB 438.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 438. The clerk will open the roll, and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, with 98 having voted in favor and 22 against the passage of Senate Bill 438, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The Speaker recognizes Representative Blue for a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 96.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is not a license plate bill. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, not Mr. Chair. Body, this is the child care bill. We in conference had some minor changes. One, as you guys remember, we sat here for a long time waiting for an amendment. So the amendment gave us the guts of what we needed for the compromise, but we had a major technical fixes, multiple that needed to be fixed. So that's a bulk of what is in the conference committee report. As you guys remember, for the children's cabinet, keep in mind the bill started with 6 appointees from the legislature, and then our compromise was to bring it down to 5. So then it would be 5 from the governor, 5 from the legislature. And then now the Senate wanted another appointee. So now it's 11 members, 5 from the governor, 6 from legislative leadership. As you guys also remember, part of the compromise was the ratios. We're taking it out, but asking KDH&E to update their ratios, and we put in there by July 1st, 2024. Well, a bulk of this goes into effect on July 1, 2024. So we bumped it to October 1st, 2024 to give them more time to go through the rules and regs process. The tax credit, we increased it to 100%. So the original one was 50% with a fiscal note of 6 million. So just if you go to 100% to multiply it by 2, so it's 12 million. And then the last thing is it creates an exempt portion for childcare. And right now there is a policy with KDH&E of 20 hours, and it's creating, allowing for up to 35 hours to watch children, that with a max of 4 kids, no more than 2 infants, and you do not have to have a license for that. So I will stand for questions. Oh, I need to, Mr. Speaker, I move to adopt the conference committee report.
Representative Prost.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The carrier did a fine job explaining the conference committee report. There was a lot of work that went into this, a lot of good compromise, and it's a good piece of legislation that I encourage you to support. Thank you.
Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I close and move my motion.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 96. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, with 110 having voted in favor and 10 against the passage of Senate Bill 96, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The Speaker recognizes Representative Will Carpenter for a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on House Bill 2532.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Leader, colleagues. House Bill 2532 would amend the Kansas Parimutuel Racing Act to credit the tax revenue generated from the wagers of the historical racing machines to the Kansas Horse Breeding Development Fund and the Kansas Fair Racing Benefit Fund. A third of that tax revenue would go to each one of those. And there are 7 states that have tax revenues or have these historical racing, and there's 31 states that have these kind of programs for breeding horses and race horses. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Representative Droege.
Good evening, everybody. I don't really have any questions, but I'm privileged and excited to speak to this bill to promote rural economic development by designating the tax on historic horse racing machines to benefit the Kansas horse racing community and the county fair associations. We will reignite this industry that has deep roots in the state. Horse racing dates back over 150 years in Kansas. In fact, Eureka Downs is the oldest track west of the Mississippi River. In the past, the horse industry generated thousands of jobs and millions of dollars in economic benefit to Kansas. The political environment shifted, and it caused the sustainability of the horse industry to be a problem. This bill redirecting the tax from the historic horse racing machines will reignite the horse and racing industry. The effect will be manifested throughout the state, not just in my district. Eureka Downs is the only functioning Kansas racetrack facility, and I assure you that the Greenwood County Fair Association and the City of Eureka are excited to bring rural economic development dollars back to the region and the state. This is a great opportunity for agriculture to bring back what was once a $100 million a year industry. This will be a win-win for everybody in the state. I urge you to vote for this resolution. Thank you.
Representative Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good grief. Okay. I would just add for context on this, we passed when we passed the sports betting bill, the historical horse racing machines were included in that. And these facilities are allowed to have up to 1,000 of those. So we don't currently have any up and running. We don't have a fiscal note or estimate on what this, how much this could be. I'm just pointing that out, and I would leave this to the will of the body. Thank you.
Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I would like to echo the comments from Representative from Eureka. I think this is an excellent opportunity to revive an industry that's really gone stagnant in the state for a number of years now. The effect is not just in Eureka to help revive Eureka Downs, but when it does get revived, it'll also affect surrounding communities like El Dorado, Emporia, my community, Iola, Fredonia, within easy driving distance of Eureka. I had the opportunity when Eureka Downs was operating to go down there on the weekends, and it was quite the active community event for the surrounding area as well. So I really think it's an opportunity to revive that industry. Kansas has had several people involved strongly in the horse racing industry. For those that came in 17, I think it was. Remember, we talked a lot about, seemed like on the floor even, of a horse named McCracken, named kind of after, although spelled different than the city of McCracken in western Kansas, owned by Janice Whittam from out of Leota. She and her husband, late husband, have owned a number of great thoroughbreds and have won some major races. And not that they would necessarily be racing at Eureka Downs, but the interest is there in the public to get this going again. The bill that we passed last year for the historical horse racing machines allowed up to 1,000 machines, as the former representative said, that would be placed in Wichita. And she's right that there's no estimate right now of what that revenue will be. But, and I'll just give this as an example. I was just looking it up in Kentucky, which has had these HHR machines for a few years now. It's really gotten very popular. They probably have over 5,000, maybe 6,000 different machines there in the state. And the impact that they've had on the horse races there in Kentucky, which of course is a major horse racing state, this year for the Kentucky Derby, which by the way is only a month away on May 4th, they are able to raise the purse for the Kentucky Derby from $3 million to $5 million. Most of that money came from the taxes on the HHR machines. So it can provide some significant revenue for an industry that needs that revival, and so I would appreciate your support for it. Thank you.
Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I close.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2532. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? Clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Butler votes maybe an aye. There we go, an aye. Representative Berquist votes no. Representative Ballard votes no. Representative O'Habasam votes no. Any further changes? Seeing none. Representative Humphreys votes no. Representative Wagner votes no. Any further changes? Seeing none. With 88 having voted in favor and 32 against, the passage of House Bill 2532, the same having received a constitutional majority of the bill, is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The Speaker recognizes Representative Sutton for a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on House Bill 2787.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is my last one, I promise, guys. All right. 2787, you can applaud. No, that's out of order. Never mind, don't do that. 2787 has two bills in it. This is basically the Guarantee Association Act because 2787 itself, the base bill, has property and casualty insurance. And in doing so, they're establishing a continuity of guarantee fund coverage if one policy is transferred to another insurer. And it also adds cybersecurity insurance into the definitions and the coverage of the property and casualty insurance guarantee association. The other one in this bill is 2810 that also deals with the Insurance Guarantee Association, but in this case, it's life and health. And it broadens the definition of, broadens the assessment base for long-term care insolvencies. You'll be happy to know that no one has ever voted against either one of these bills. 2787 passed the House. I'm sure there'll be a first time right now, but 2787 passed the House 119 to 0, passed the Senate 40 to 0. 2810 passed the House 120 to 0. The Senate didn't get an opportunity to jump in on that one, but with that, I will stand for questions.
Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I would like to take this opportunity to thank my chairman, who I've worked with for the last several years, while we have had shared words up and down. It's been a remarkable experience, and I have certainly enjoyed working with him on all the issues that we've dealt with. He's a very good chairman, so thank you. He was very thorough on his description of this bill. It's a good bill, and I'm not going to say I'm not going to vote for it. I am going to vote for it, so we're in agreement. So anyway, I would ask for your support. It is a good bill. Thank you.
Representative, you may close.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my ranking. We have a good time in committee, and it's been a fantastic opportunity to work with her. Mr. Speaker, I move to adopt the Conference Committee report for HB 2787.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2787. The clerk will open the roll, and you may record your vote. As every member had the opportunity to record their vote, the clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, with 117 having voted in favor and 3 against the passage of House Bill 2787, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The Speaker recognizes Representative Burkamp for a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 410.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good evening, everybody. Hope you're all having a good day out there. All right, Senate Bill 410 is an amalgamation of a few different tax policies, so I'm sure you all know this better than I do, but I will still go ahead and explain it, at least to the best of my knowledge. All right, so we're going to start with the income tax piece. Number 1 is the Salt Parity Act cleanup language. This actually came to us from one of our friends in Sedgwick County over here. This just deals with including legislative, I guess it includes legislative finding for the purpose of the SALT Parity Act, to avoid double taxation of income for pass-through entity owners, and it also clarifies a few other provisions. The next item is net operating loss subtraction modifications. And this is just allowing taxpayers to carry back federal NOLs in tax years 2018 through 2020 relating to the Federal CARES Act. And then they can carry that forward up to 20 years. Next section deals with 2080C employment credit disallowances. So this will be subtraction modification for Kansas adjusted gross income for disallowances related to 280C subsection A from 2021 forward, and then for 50% of the federal disallowance related to ERTCs in 2020-21. Next section is disallowed business interest language, and this is just clarifying the addition and subtraction modifications for disallowed business interest paid or accrued in previous tax years. Second to last of this section, withholding tax penalty reductions. We're replacing the current 15% penalty for late payment on withholding taxes with a graduated rate. And then lastly, the single port authority tax credit extension, we're making that through 2029. Most all these had passed through either the House or Senate fairly easily, just like the others to come. The next section, which I'm sure everybody's holding their breath out there, relates to property tax. A bulk of these are related to the revenue neutral pieces. Number one, it's going to say county clerks are not required to send hearing notices to owners that is exempt from taxation. Second piece, it will say the governing body who exceeds revenue neutral rate to take place on the same day as commencement of the public hearing to exceed the rate. Next piece, governing bodies who do not hold hearings can exceed the revenue neutral rate where final taxable value is less than the estimated value. Next one, changes to the required notice form. This will establish new provisions for the heading and opening statement on the R&R form. And last but not least, on the revenue neutral piece, we're gonna extend the postage reimbursement through 2024. All right, on to some more exciting things here. The electric generation facility property tax exemption uniformity. That's a bill that we recently heard and passed out of the House fairly easily. Just gonna move all of our exemptions to 10 years to make that consistent. The next piece, agricultural land adverse influence codification. We dealt with this, I believe, last year, and this is just gonna codify adjustments to reducing taxable value of ag land due to certain things such as canopy cover, water table fluctuations, etc. Next, we have agritourism land classification changes, which a lot of people here are pretty excited about. This will permit use, this will say in 2021, land devoted to ag use includes land and buildings used in part of registered agritourism activity by a registered operator. Next, we have residential real property valuation appeals. This will permit use of appraisals by a Kansas certified residential real property appraiser to be used for equalization appeal procedure when it's filed within 60 days after the notice. Second to last, personal property filing changes. There's multiple in here, but I'm just going to list a few of them. So after initial filing, only future filings needed if there's a change, which should be a good thing. It'll reduce late filing of oil and gas lease penalties, amongst other things. Last but not least in this section is BODA small claims teleconferencing. I'd say that's pretty self-explanatory there. That does it for the property tax piece. Last but not least, we do have 3 sales tax authorities for Marshall, Rollins, and Neosho counties. We're just giving them the ability to put a county-wide sales tax on their ballot for approval. Last but not least, just want to thank the person who put the CCRB together because it made my life much simpler and it was very helpful, so I appreciate that. And so with that, Mr. Speaker, I move to adopt the conference committee report and I will stand for questions.
Representative Sawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. maker of the motion did a thorough job explaining this pretty long conference committee report. This is one of about, I think, 7 bills we're going to have in conference coming out of tax committee. This one has the most pieces in it, but these are non-controversial pieces. These things pass the body big. He did a thorough job explaining them, but if you want to look up your voting or a little more about the bills, there are 11, we took contents of 11 bills and put them in here. So if you want to look them up, it's House Bill 2465, House Bill 2002, House Bill 2254, House Bill 2609, House Bill 2519, House Bill 2828, Senate Bill 8, not all of last year, Senate Bill 8, pieces of Senate Bill 8, Senate Bill 376, Senate Bill 482, Senate Bill 480, and Senate Bill 537. I rise in support.
Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's obviously quite a few bills in this conference committee report. One of the things that I've worked on is the reimbursement to the counties for the cost of the tax notices that we require them to send out if they exceed the revenue neutral rate. And as it was stated, this bill extends that reimbursement to the counties for 1 year. And last year, I introduced a bill that would extend that reimbursement to the counties permanently, and I believe that passed the House, I think with only 7 votes against it, I believe, and then it got stalled in the Senate and didn't pass, but this conference committee report would at least extend that reimbursement for 1 year, and so then that gives us time to try to get something done on that next year, and I'll probably introduce a bill next year that would extend that for a longer period of time, probably 5 years, probably not permanently, because I've been told it probably needs to have a sunset on it, but this would at least buy us a little bit of time to come up with something next year to extend that for a longer period of time. And I just think that if we don't extend that and we require the counties to pay for that, that'll just cause even higher property taxes. And so I don't want to impose more unfunded mandates on the counties, and I don't want higher property taxes at the local level. And so I believe that's an important part of this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I close.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 410. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Kessler votes aye. Representative Stogsdill votes aye. Any further changes? Representative Carmichael votes aye. Any further changes? Seeing none, with 120 having voted in favor and 0 against the passage of Senate Bill 410, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Next bill. The Speaker recognizes Representative Tarwater for a motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 143.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate Bill 143 was the elevator bill, and we made a couple of changes in conference. First, there was a $500 cap for the services of an inspection, and we removed that. Second, we had previously removed a 5-year load test, and we added it back in, but every 6 years. And if your insurance company does it or you have a maintenance agreement for it, then you don't need to do it twice. We added back inspectors into the bill because evidently inspectors bill at a lower rate than mechanics, and then we gave them a route to get a license through a school as well, rather than go through a 5-year program. And that's it. Mr. Speaker, I move to adopt the conference committee report.
Representative Probst.
Yeah, it's a good bill. I thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd encourage you to support this good piece of legislation here.
You may close. You may close.
I close.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 143. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The roll is still open. The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Silas Miller votes aye. Any further changes? Seeing none, with 118 having voted in favor and 2 against the passage of Senate Bill 143, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. Clerk will record the vote. The Speaker recognizes Representative Tarwater for a motion to adopt the conference. We already did. The Speaker recognizes Representative Tarwater for a motion to adopt the agree to disagree report for Senate Bill 172.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 172 was the property bill that had to do with countries of concern. And we have a member that was not comfortable signing the conference committee report. And so I move to adopt the agree to disagree conference committee report and that a new conference committee be adopted. Appointed.
Seeing no discussion, Representative, you may close.
I close.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. The Speaker appoints Representatives Tarwater, Bourgeon, and Probst as conferees on part of the House. Are there announcements? Seeing none. Speaker, nope. Representative Stockstill.
Democrats will have agenda in the morning following first recess. We'll be back on the floor at 10.
Seeing no further announcements, the Speaker recognizes the Majority Leader for a motion to adjourn.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was challenged to do something about 10 p.m., but I won't. Yeah, no, we're not going there. Mr. Speaker, I move the House adjourn until Friday, April 5th at 10 a.m.
You've all heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. Motion carries. We are adjourned.